Finish the chapter 7 discussion. So, at the request, I will refrain from proceeding into chapter 8 and entertain questions tonight. Yes. Did you have a question?
Oh, I did have a question. It's not about what we've been reading now.
Well, it's open to any questions.
Okay. Pranada showed me a picture, yes, Mother Jasoda and baby Krishna. Mother Jasoda was blue like Krishna. And Pranada said she had read in a number of places that Mother Jasoda was blue. I've never read that, I've never heard that, I've never seen any other picture of Mother Jasoda being blue. And I have heard a story of Krishna's cowherd boyfriends telling Krishna, you know, you're not really the son of Nanda and Jasoda because you're dark and they're light. And then Krishna got so upset. He ran off and hid in the hollow of a tree and wouldn't go home when the other boys went home. And Mother Jasoda had to go find him, and he was just crying and crying. And she finally found him. What's wrong, my little child? And he said, you're not my real mother. I'm not your son. And she said, it's not true. And she said, the reason you're dark is because you were born at midnight. So, is Mother Jasoda blue or is she light, light colored?
There may be a description of her that includes the color of her complexion in Radha Krishna, Vanadishtipika Rupa Goswami. We don't have that here. I mean, in the room at the moment, and one in the house. So I'll see if Rupa Goswami says anything there. I don't think that he does, but Prabhupada seems to have approved paintings in which he's painted both dark and light.
In which Krishna's painted dark and light.
Where Yashoda is, I think.
Oh, Mother Jasoda, I've never seen a dark.
Never seen a dark one. Maybe I'm wrong about it. Here's one, she's light, and there's a famous one with her dark. She's quite fair in complexion, so all eyes on Pranada. To get her information about that.
It was a painting that
Radha
shone
Krishna
around.
Gana Desha Deepika.
You're hoping it's in there.
Well, I just read it recently, so I'm thinking maybe you're right that it's there.
But you saw a painting of Shamran or something?
Yeah. Yeah, she painted Yashoda blue, and it struck me as correct because I remember just reading that recently.
something she painted recently? That one never really.
That's recent.
Mm-hmm. She tries to be accurate according to what Shruta Panta, what she's heard from Parag, but there may be different opinions also in that regard as well. And I think that overall, of course, the overarching, in one sense, is that these many types of such descriptions are very limited in examples in this world, colors and so forth. I mean, Mahara has her, I guess, deities, Radha and I wrong, and she had a guest, young man, visiting the house, interested in Krishna, and they were talking to him about Krishna, and he said, how come Krishna's white? Because he knew that Krishna was dark, the deity was white. So, in some places, Krishna's white. Is the answer. So, again, that is one explanation. Of course, the other idea is that we sometimes evoke is the fact that in Indian aesthetics, every emotion has a corresponding color. That's not untrue of Western emotions and colors. And you have soft colors and passionate colors and so on and so forth. So that said, in more specifically in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, then the different rasas are described with presiding deities and colors also. So Krishna's color, rather than being blue or black, whatever, is the color of romantic love. So that's what his color is. But then, of course, it says that the sham is the color of romantic love. This burnt, like you're wearing scarf, and like you see in the forest, is the color of Sakirasa. I heard a nice story today. You probably heard it too, apparently.
Right.
And Radha sent it to me. She was in school, and she has a Christian friend, and her friend and her have a somewhat close relationship, and a good part of that is their mutual interest in God, in loving God, having a loving relationship with God, although obviously they're from different traditions. And she said in the course, everybody in her class knows me because in the course of conversation, people talk about the people they love, their friends, their parents, and so on and so forth. And she always talks about me, and Swami said this, and Swami said that, because she's always listening to my lectures and so forth. And so something came up, and
Our friend was working on a painting of
Yeah.
flowers, just mixing different colors and
Right.
trying to find different colors.
right,
And then
a question came up, and I think that, I don't remember what the question was, but Arana gave an answer that I had given her, something like that. Swami said something like this. Remember the question?
I don't remember the question, but she put on,
And then she said, then her friend said, I would like to hear his voice at some point. She got it right here on her iPhone. So then she turned it on, and the whole class started listening to Swami's voice in the lecture. And then she said, let's play a little more. And she said, I'm getting this feeling, this color, kind of a burnt, rust, orange. And Radha was quick to tell her that's the only color he wears for the last 40
well,
years.
she painted it. She took her paints and she made the color, and Rodney said, that's the color he wears.
Yeah. So, of course, the color of the enunciates, the holy people in India. sannyasins. It's also the color of fraternal love. So, at any rate, there are such an identification with colors and rasas and so forth, emotions, and in aesthetics perhaps in greater precision or detail than we have worked out in Western culture. Maybe we have more broader terms like passionate colors, as I said, warm colors, cold colors, so on and so forth. But Krishna is the color of romantic love, makes one, and Mother Yasoda is the personification of parental love. One makes one wonder about that description of her being of the same color. And of course, the story you told, I've heard that story before. I forget where. It's
I think I've read it somewhere, but I know I've heard such an eminent Swami tell it.
It's the charming story. I don't remember the color of parental love given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And then short of any such description that has been offered by an Acharya, if we don't find it in Rupa Goswami's Radhakrishna Madhya, which you can find out online probably, then it hasn't been told, and we're left to some imagination that has approval of spiritual standing, as in the case with the windows to the spiritual world, as Prabhupada referred to them. I'm just listening to.
Date.
Through a date.
Yeah, this was after that date. I'm just pointing out
that particular thing.
technical.
I was listening to a brief.
The window's closed at an unusual
A brief talk that Ramaswamy gave at someone that sent me about the books and Prabhupada's particulars about the art and so forth, how things should be painted, and he wants to be particular about it. He never changes. He was not happy with that. Unapproved changes. Whether, of course, whether he's trying to make a point only to that and deal with the tendency that he saw in his disciples of the American. He could say Americans always want to change things. Maybe not Americans and Europeans, but Americans in particular always want to change things and make it better. You know, the entrepreneurialism, it's a Vaishya, capitalist
new and improved
society. It's a new and improved version. Really, like we were saying last night, you want to invent now thousands or whatever it is, millions of years into humanity with a spirituality, better than it's ever been, described before, without any examples that personify it, that compare to, for example, the Buddha or Jesus or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and so forth. So, anyway, he characterized, I think, particularly his American disciples, who always wanted to change things, and he found it to be problematic in relation to a tradition that is not without new light or reframing and so forth, and has been over the years, and it's characteristic of our Parivar coming from Bhakti Vinod, but is at the same time a time-tested tradition that has produced considerable results, and the fear of changing them. Such principles, I heard a fellow say that he wanted to be innovative in the West in distributing Krishna consciousness, and that he wanted to be careful in doing it, not to change the philosophy, not to do it outside of. This was a person in a different organization, outside of the parameters of the organization, and without changing any principles, but only details. and acknowledging that there's a difference between the two details and principles. All that's fairly reasonable, but you have to know. My advice would be first know what Krishna is, then talk about Krishna in the West or whatever, north or south, and, and, and what the philosophy is also. Same person in the talk wasn't clear on the difference between the Atma and Brahman. So there's an important tradition of thousands of years that Prabhupada's books, for example, are derived from. And, to know Prabhupada and to be focused on Prabhupada, as many of his disciples want to be, really involves, I've said before that if you look at Krishna, it's just Krishna, keep with the right eyes, scriptural eyes, and you see he's not alone. There's Radha, and there's the whole assembly of the inhabitants of Vrindavan, for example, and of course they're all, as it turns out, more important than Krishna. They are love of Krishna. They are Krishna in that sense. So you see them, or you see there's Krishna, you look further, you see there's Radha and Krishna, keep looking, you see there's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so on and so forth. And so it is with Prabhupada or any guru, you look carefully. If you have one guru, really, in a true sense of the term, then you have many gurus. You understand the parampara. You actually have a relationship with Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, and so on and so forth. To know Prabhupada, to know his associates, to know you acquainted with him in terms of how they look at him also, and see that he's or any guru, any acharya is a multifaceted person, and so this is to have a mature type of understanding relationship with someone, to divorce him, as some do, from previous acharyas and freeze him in time and say what he says now is where it begins, and everything else is not as important. Whatever he says from here on is, the beginning and the end, as some people do. That's very, very problematic. And so that was just an example of a very basic point in philosophy that someone didn't understand while talking about, innovatively spreading Krishna consciousness and being cautious about not changing the philosophy. Didn't exactly change it, but left a very basic concept unanswered and so forth. And so I think we are part of a rich tradition that we should enter into, and understand that we're entering by doing so, into the world of our guru. He's not alone there. It's not that you're going to go to Goloka Vrindavan and it'll just be Prabhupada and nobody else. Yes.
Kind of in the same line of that, when we read Rupa Goswami's examples of all the various rasas and all the various bhavas and the experiences as put forth from the Bhagavatam, this is an example of this. This is an example. So it would seem that then all those engaged in the Leela would have to be at the stage of Bhava Bhakti. Is that to use those as examples? Is that proper understanding?
Well, the examples of different ecstasies.
Yes.
That it uses are all examples of people who are experiencing
That
more than bhava,
Hmm?
the perfection of bhava. You're tasting rasa. You can have bhava and not rasa. It takes some time. That's the developing of the sthayi bhava. When the sthayi bhava is mature, when it's budding, it's bhava. When it's mature, then that's prema. That's the sthayi bhava, is the basis then of the whole experience of rasananda. So all those people, yeah, they're all participants in the Leela. There may be also persons entering into the Leela that aren't descending with the Leela, but they would also be very extraordinary persons.
So an example that utilized the wives of the Brahmanas, say, is that I'm just trying to, you see what I'm saying? Are they perfected?
Depends how the example is used.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to, in that sense, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's tasting rasa. It's not explaining that they're tasting rasa necessarily.
Okay.
They are, I believe, thought to be sadhakas who have entered the Leela and the Prakat Leela, the manifest Leela, is such that people can bump into it. That's its generosity. It has elements of both of perfection and imperfection in it. Not that it's imperfect.
No.
It manifests in the world. It's like the same thing with unless it's perfected, it has its spiritual and material. Spiritual aspect and material aspect. As much as the gross body comes out of the subtle body, so the chitta is deeply impressed with bhakti, samskar, and so forth, then arguably your body is to that extent spiritualized. So the Prakat Leela is sometimes compared to a sadhaka deha, work in progress. Not that the Leela is in progress, but work in progress, but it is descending in one sense for devotees on a certain level, whose pitch of separation is separation has reached a pitch that Krishna can't tolerate their separation anymore, and neither they. And so that's one reason you can say why the Leela manifests for such devotees. And then, those devotees in this world, and everybody in the world is not like them. So you do have examples given in other scriptures. I think, for example, Garda Samhita gives examples of various henchmen of Kamsa and who they were in their previous life and how they did something, and so they were born there. They're not necessarily portrayed as being siddhas. So not everybody in the Prakat Leela is a siddha. But examples of someone experiencing rasa would imply that they were on the level to experience rasa, but all the examples aren't used in that way. So in that sense, no is the answer, and yes is the answer in that sense.
So when it's mentioned that the demigods are to take birth and engage in the pastime, but they actually are with the siddhas.
For example, entering into the siddha.
Yeah, entering into the body.
There are some examples like that, yeah.
So, Nanda and Yasoda, these were demigods. Also, demigods were there with them.
Mm-hmm.
So with should we look at the demigods as in praying bhakti?
Well, they were
in
the
that-
sadhakas, those devotees who participate in who enter into the who perfect themselves in bhakti can come from different quarters. They can come from this world through sadhana. They can come from heaven. They're also considered sadhakas, but they are described differently because they're coming from a different place. I've reasoned, for example, that as per the Bhagavad Gita, there is the description of those whose yoga, and that the devotees to some extent is speaking about yoga per se, but Prabhupada cited it in relation to himself as a devotee. So the devotees who are not perfect in their practice but have practiced for a long time. They can, there are those who, not perfectly practiced for a shorter period of time can attain heaven. Long time, they can take birth in the homes of transcendentalists. And from those in heaven, then the Gita says they come down, they take birth in pious families and so forth, where they have the liberty, the wealthy family have the liberty to, I suppose, because things are taken care of for them and the environment is more conducive to pick up where they left off and so forth. But some go to heaven, and those coming down, if Krishna Lila comes, then they can come from there. So they're also considered, Jiva Goswami explains, to be sadhana siddhas. But they're coming from there. So, and they may appear, and not only by way of, like we say, entering into Nanda and Yashoda, as in the case of, what are the names? Dara. Anyway.
Yeah.
But appearing as Krishna's friends and so forth. So not everybody anyway in the Prakat Lila is the Siddha, but many are sadhakas, and it's an awfully generally the sadhaka who's attained Swarup Siddhi then enters into the Lila the next life. There may be other instances. The heavenly people may not have done that. Were there, devotees there, possibly. So there are different possibilities, yes.
Yesterday you said, and I don't remember the context, that bhakti is in the mode of goodness. She appears there.
Bhakti has a form that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has termed sattviki bhakti. Sattva means sattva guna. So a sattviki form of bhakti. So bhakti manifests in the sattva guna. She's transcendental, but she manifests in the sattva guna. And in that context, bestows the liberation upon those who aspire for it. Because without bhakti, they can't attain it. And they are in the mode of goodness themselves. And the knowledge, for example, Gyan, is of Sattva-guna. Knowledge is. So the Gyanis seek to leave knowledge behind. That's the idea of Brahma Saruja. There's no knowledge, there's no knower, and there's no object of knowledge. There's no object of knowledge, there's no knower, and so there's nothing to be known. Knowing it, you know everything and know nothing. Something like that at the same time. So, that's what merging is about, as much as you can. You are a jiva, so you can't lose your status as such. But by getting very highly situated in the mode of goodness and being involved in contemplation of the Atma, meditation, and so forth, with factoring in bhakti. In Gita, in the Bhagavatam, there's described bhakti in different nature. It's even possible to do bhakti in the Rajaguna and attain Vaikuntha, according to the Bhagavatam. They want to attain Brahman, so they do.
So bhakti gives them that.
Bhakti gives them that, yeah.
So in other words, whatever liberation is attained from the stage of sattva, that's gifted really by bhakti.
Yeah, you can't attain liberation without bhakti.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, the Bhagavatam is very clear on that, and the Gita also, very nice verses. It's a very, very strong point of the commentators. Gita is very clear. Bhaktya mama vajanati yadanyastasmi tattvaha. Stomam tattato gnatva vishte tadanantaram. It's speaking directly there about emerge into Brahman. Brahmabhuta prasanatma nasochte nakakshti samasareshu bhuteshu manabhakti bhakti param. It's speaking about Gyan Mishra Bhakti. They become Brahmabhuta. And they become happy prasanatma in what is called Brahmabhuta, and free from hankering and limitation. And they attain bhakti. And the next verse, Bhakti Mama Bhajanati Abanyas Jasmi Tatvata Tomam Tatvato Gnatva Vishate Taranantaram. And only by bhakti can one enter into me. Vishate Taranantaram. One can only enter into me by bhakti. And arguably Krishna is speaking about himself in terms of this Brahman feature that the Gyanis want to enter into. Now there are Gyanis that don't want to enter into the Brahman feature. By association, they can attain position like Sukadev, for example, or the Kumaras. That's also a possibility. That's the higher end, if you will, of Gyan Mishra Bhakti.
So Bhakti chooses, she's free to enter into goodness and give those things.
Yeah.
And related, you have,
There's no jailbreak is the point.
yeah.
As much as that's what Krishna says in Gita, Mama Maya Devata. If you want to look at material life as bondage, so the example of incarceration is appropriate. And Durga, very difficult to go from this world. So as if we are bound, incarcerated, there's no jailbreak. It's not like Krishna makes the jail or whatever and you get out. Krishna makes the jail, there are no escapes. There's no tunnels beneath there. That's what Bhagavatam says. What's the verse? Avishuddha Buddhaya, Vimuktamanina. How does it start?
Rich,
Yay.
Actually, Muktamanina. Avishuddha Buddhaya. Arya Kachjena Paramapadam Tadha Patanti Adhu. So they come up to, they dig the tunnel and everything like that, right? But they can't get out. They think we're out. But they're not. I mean, even these days, you really, it's pretty hard to break out of jail nowadays. I mean, in the United States, it's awfully hard not to be, you're out of the walls, but you're not out of the, cameras everywhere and whatever. They just start probably putting chips in the prisoners, and then, they can know where they are at all times. Something like that. So that's, if you can do that, materially speaking, then what to speak of Mama Maya. Krishna says Duratjaya. Prabhupada uses the word Duratjaya to translate insurmountable. So there's no jailbreaks. That's only a fantasy, a dream that some people in jail dream about. And their dream about escaping involves, that's why it's not possible, because it involves not an unwillingness to reform and an unwillingness to do the duties that you have, an unwillingness to recognize that you are a subordinate entity and you have an obligation. So the idea of renunciation unto itself does not acknowledge that the jiva is a jiva, in a sense. It has some responsibility, it's a serving entity. So, and then the low end of that is Brahmasayuja with the help of bhakti. That's on the low, and then from there you go to like Shantaras. That's way higher than that, but it's similar. It's way higher than you go into Dasya, and the more this is coming out, the acknowledgement of this, what I am, I'm a servant, so I have something to do, right? At least I have someone to acknowledge. There's kind of, well, at least I acknowledge, praise be, and, we're all here peacefully on his account, something like that. So that there's no jailbreak. You have to be reformed. You have to acknowledge something like that. Yes.
Just on the related, you said that Mayavadis have a kind of twisted idea of Gyan, which made me think, I wonder if I have a misunderstanding of Gyan as described in the Gita, where I in a simple way, I always associated Gyan with Mayavad, that they're attempting to go to Brahma, Sayuja. Gyanis, that's what Gyanis do. That's what I thought. Is that too simplistic then to think like
so
that?
there's much more to the word, different applications, just like we have Sambandha Gyan. So there is knowledge about Bhagwan that is foundational to bhakti. So there is Gyan in bhakti, knowledge about Krishna, his attributes, his qualities, his leelas, his form, and so on and so forth, his teaching, and all. And of course, there are devotees who, there's the Gyan Mishra Bhakti. By Gyan Mishra Bhakti, you can get Brahma Sahuja, but you could attain more than that also. You could get Shantarasa, attain Shantarasa, for example. And if you attain Shantarasa, and in good association, you can attain Dasya or Sakyarasa. That's the one thing about Shantarasa that it's different than the other rasas. You can move upward from it by association. So it's kind of this neutrality. It's kind of a little bit of the fence sitting, so to speak, rather than being on the other side. I mean, it is on the other side. It's liberated. It's very exalted and so forth, but it's not defining in the way that Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya are. It can be changed. They don't change, and they can be changed by association with those rasas. It's possible. So the problem with the Mayavadis is another thing. Krishna, for example, I mentioned the other day, he praises the Gyanis. He says the four are the best, they're very dear to me. They see Vasudeva Sarvamiti, this is their vision. Krishna is everything, Vasudeva is everything, and so on. Obviously, they're not, the Kumaras were not offensive to Krishna. Shukadeva was not offensive to Krishna. Sukadeva Goswami, they were Gyanis. By Mayavad, the problem with Mayavad is that their idea of what constitutes knowledge ultimately is the understanding of the oneness, absolute oneness between Jiva and Atma. But there is no absolute oneness between Jiva and Atma. According to the sacred text, and you can quote all you like from the sacred text that say Jiva and Atma are one, it doesn't do away with all the statements Atma are not one. You can't just ignore them. We don't ignore them. We take them Jiva is one and different, and at the same time, and we philosophy to explain that. So when you say there is no Jiva, Jiva is an illusion, and the reality is that there's only Brahman. There is no Jiva. This is not knowledge, but this is the foundational knowledge, if you will, of the Mayavad, and also that there's no world. This is this spiritual idealism. There is no matter. Now you've got some modern people try to look at the way to Vedanta from look at physics, quantum physics from the Vedic point of view. And they try to say that it supports quantum physics, the idea that there is no world. I mean, that's hardly what the majority of quantum physicists agree with, that there is no objective world or world of matter. But at any rate, This is the problem with the knowledge, if you will, of the Maya bodies. Gyan is another thing. So wrong gyan or something, or some wrong-headedness there. That's the problem. But in many other forms, Gyan Mishra Bhakti is also, you have knowledge of that Krishna is God. This is the very high end. That you're fully into Krishna. He's God. Even in Dwarka, we find this, even in Mathura. But Vrindavan's characterized as Gyan Shunya Bhakti. So it has to be the most blissful because we know ignorance is bliss. Right? They correspond. The Tamaguna and Ladini, they actually have some correspondence. The low end and the high end. Love is an ignorance, right? We talked about naive reality the other day, the philosophical concept of naive reality. That is spiritual form of it that is there in Krishna Lila. They have no head for the tattva. It just gets in the way. And practically it gets in the way of our everyday life. Just if I tell you, you're really only atoms, and it's only love is really only this hormone going off, and so on and so forth. And then what do? You can't live that, right? You can't live that life. What else? Yes.
The jail metaphor raises the question of crime. What's the crime? I have a friend who posits the crime is turning your back on Krishna and reading his Leela.
Well, I would say that metaphors have their limitations. And they don't prove anything, but they seek to help give us insight into truths, give us a handle on down, all of them to some extent. What the scriptures say, we can say this world is like a jail. We can use a metaphor like that to explain it from one angle, and there will be limitations. We can speak about it in an entirely different way as well. And say it's the love of Vishnu, the Shrishti Leela, the one that can many Lokavatu Lila Kaivalyam, out of love, for joy, out of play. And so to talk about it as a jail is a very negative way to talk. So there are different ways to talk about it, ways to explain it. We use it in this instance tonight just to say that there's no getting out of jail, and as much as you can apply that metaphor to speak about our situation, there's no getting out of the material world without bhakti. The scriptural truth is undeniably is that karma has no beginning. Karma is the influence that binds the jiva with matter. What binds the jiva to matter is karma. And so as much as there's no beginning to matter, the material world, Hinduism is well known everywhere except maybe in some Gaudiya group somewhere, that it speaks about a beginningless world that comes and goes in cycles. I mean, this is just common understanding and an accurate understanding of how, compared to, for example, and this is the difference, Western idea of linear time and the Christian idea of some beginning, and even the scientific idea in some quarters of a beginning of the universe. And while we may acknowledge the beginning of the universe, we say that follows the end, of the previous universe. And there are scientific theories also today, credible ones, that and make that kind of conjecture and try to support it with mathematics and so forth. Very similar to the Hindu idea that with every big bang, that's a explosion, or there's a big crunch, and so anyway. So this cyclical time in Hinduism is characterized by a cyclical perspective on time. In Western philosophy, for the most part, is in this regard characterized by a linear conception of time. There are a fair number of evidences now and in the past also of Western thinking and philosophy and science giving room for the possibility of time being cyclical. Nietzsche, you find it in his writing. So there's, in modern science, there are some room for it. But at any rate, basically, the Western thinking, it's been, with regard to time, it's been linear, and with the beginning, out of nothing, the world was created. It's a Christian doctrine like this, ex nihilo. Now there are a number of Christian theologians that question that and say, well, it doesn't mean what it sounds like, that it's out of nothing, what it means it's unrestricted and so forth. Anyway, so the point I'm making basically is there's a difference between Eastern and Western thought in this. There may be some convergence, we hope, that over time and whatnot, but it's very clear that Hinduism, that means the Upanishads, the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, it's in the Brahma Samhita, to use some of our texts, it's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's very clear everywhere, again and again and again and again and again, that the world has no beginning. That means that Maya Shakti has no beginning. The Jiva Shakti has no beginning. They're aspects of God, they're Shaktis of God. God is complete with his Shaktis. And the two of them coming together is what the world is about, and the force that binds them together is karma. And with regard to that combination of the two, under the influence of karma, that makes up the world, well, there's no beginning to the world cycles. There is no beginning to the world cycles. So, as much as there's no beginning to Maya Shakti, there's no beginning to the Jiva Shakti, and there's no beginning to the world cycles, there can't be any beginning to karma, which is integral to the world cycles. Karma is manifest and unmanifest, like the Jivas are, and like the Maya Shakti is, and like the world is. That's the end of the cycle, and then manifesting again. But that cyclical affair has no beginning. And so it's very, you can read it probably in Wikipedia, or any Indologist, anybody that studied basic Hindu ideas. This is the belief of the Hindus. It means and their belief comes from the Upanishads, from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Puranas, and so forth, the Veda. And the idea there of cyclical time is much more developed idea than, for example, you find in Greece or some other cultures where cyclical time was a way of thinking based on the changing of seasons and things go around. So it's a much more sophisticated notion of that. And again, it seems to have some, there are scientific people today who seem to buy into that also. They're not buying into Hinduism, they're buying into that idea and think that it has some value, that it's true, and it's how the world works. So anyway, yes, the prison example implies that there was a crime committed. If you want to stretch it out and try to include that, I suppose you could say, yes, there is a crime, and it has no beginning. And it's a crime in the sense to not turn towards Krishna. Of course, it's described as turning away. These types of, the famous verse in the Bhagavatam, Bhayam Vitya Vishtasya, the turning away, is an example of the limits of language. If you look at the commentaries on such verses and so forth, you find the explanation that I've given of Anadi Karma. So you can call it original sin then, if you want, the Christian notion. It wouldn't be, that's not very popular, but we are under the impression that there are things that cannot be known other than through revelation, and that the sacred texts are a body of revelation, and such topics are examples of that. So we take it on its face, even though it doesn't always settle that well with some people. Now, when I recently had the opportunity to speak with some ethnic Hindu families, and this question was asked of me, that, why is it, if we're Satchidananda and all, why is it so hard, to realize what are we doing here in the first place, and that kind of thing. So I explained that for God to be full taster, experiencer of love, a connoisseur of love, as we think of him, all loving, then God is all loving, and all forms of love must be part of his experiential reality. And in the Paravyam in Vaikuntha, then he is limited in terms of expressing compassion in the form of bestowing mukti, because there are only muktas. And so out of a desire to bestow mukti, which is a powerful expression of compassion, then there's a corresponding world that goes with that. That's this world. When I told them that, they thought, oh, that's such a nice answer. They had some, I thought, some predisposition to it. Someone say, oh, great, so, so that I'm suffering so that God can be compassionate. But that whole argument is like, you don't understand that you are God. You are the part of God. You are one of the Shaktis of God who is complete with his Shaktis. So there's no one to blame. You are part of God that's doing this, that's playing this part. From the Abed point of view, there's no one to blame. And if we want to look at from the Vedic point of view, then we blame you. because you keep doing things that, that cause reactions that constitute bondage.
You're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Yeah. Right.
Catch 108.
So God's, doing what he does. And part of it is he's being compassionate. He only has himself to deal with, so we just happen to be, a part of him. And so the whole idea that I'm separate and, hey, I want it on my terms, no, this is what bondage is about. This is the bondage. So, if you look, this is an overworked issue, but if you look, the more you really progress spiritually, see, on the lower end of spiritual practice, there's the prospect of having problems with God and the way he does things. Because you're still experiencing problems and suffering in your life, and your bhakti hasn't reached a point of relieving you of the sufferings and so forth. And so there may be questions and doubts about God, and you have to be convinced to serve and inspired to serve, and so on and so forth. And so the idea comes that, well, you've been here forever, and you think, why me? And there are others that haven't been here. And so God's partial, and you start having problems with him on the lower end. The higher you get, and the more advanced you get in spiritual practice, the problem comes on the other end. The more in other words, the more you get to know God by making spiritual advancement, the more there's no place in your head for the idea that you could leave God. That just, like, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. And you say, so if I have to fall from Vaikuntha, then I'm not going to Vaikuntha, and I don't want that Vaikuntha. That can't be Vaikuntha. That's a different Vaikuntha than what I'm interested in. It's just as a person will refuse on the lower end, he can't, wait a minute, that's not fair, or something like that. It makes sense, sounds like God's not, good. The more you get to make progress spiritually, then the more you can't relate to such an argument that it's untrue, really. It is untrue. No one falls from Vaikuntha. No one could leave Krishna, and Krishna couldn't let anybody leave. That's such as the nature of love, the nature of perfection. There cannot be imperfection within perfection. The word siddhi means perfect, perfect, vasiddha. There cannot be imperfection within perfection. It won't arise there. In the imperfect condition, then perfection can come from outside of it and perfect us. But with imperfection, there's no meaning to perfection, which contains within it an element or even a prospect of imperfection. So you just undefine the word, or you've given a whole different definition. An imperfect perfection doesn't make any sense. So these are good points, I suppose, to raise. I think that despite hearing them, people remain attached to their ideas. There are other things going on besides scriptural understanding, reason, fidelity to the tradition, the Guru Parampara, and so forth. Right? We talked about it years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
We had a long conversation.
Yeah. I mean, and there's many beautiful ways to talk about our conditioned life that make it better
Mm.
in terms of its prospect than even Nitya-siddhas. So it's very, you have to get the broader picture. And, I mean, the suffering is a perception. It's not happening to you. It doesn't happen to the Atma. It happens in the mind only. Of course, that doesn't pacify people who are suffering, but that's the teaching. And it's a good teaching. It's a good explanation. The world has no beginning, so karma has no beginning. It's just and beginning means time, and the world you want to go to that you think you fall from, there is no time. There's only time there in terms of sequence of events, for the sake of sequence. There's no beginnings or ends. Every Leela has no beginning and has no end, although there's a sequence to it that's appearing here and not. And like the examples can just kind of help us, limited as any metaphor is, of the sun, right? It's always 12 o'clock somewhere, right? And it's only 12 o'clock for 1 second in every place. But it's always 12 o'clock somewhere. So the Leela as an example has been given. So where is the question of something, an event originating? Now there's the event of your liberation, right? There's the event of your liberation. So someone like, well, there's a point where you become liberated, where you want, but that happens here. And what happens when you become liberated in the bhakti context? It means that a bhava from there that's eternally existing, Nitya-siddha Krishna Prem, Sadhya Kagunai, that eternally existing bhava has entered into you in this world. That has a beginning. So there's a beginning to your bhakti. And but the bhava of Madhurya Rasa, the bhava of Vatsalya Rasa, the bhava of Sakya Rasa has no beginning. And it has many different forms and expressions, unlimited. Yours is one of the unlimited potential expressions of that bhava in relationship with Krishna as a friend. So there's no beginning in that sense. That's a strong point of the philosophy. That the bhava, what you want to attain, has to be eternal. The bhava can't be something that's an event in time. It's eternally existing. Otherwise, what you attain is not something eternal. So the bhava has to be eternal. So it's not that it begins. And so, how that plays out in terms of somebody just came to the world, it's like they were always there. The bhava is always there. And here's another expression of it. And there's always new expressions of it at every moment from everyone who is in a. So again, analogies, metaphors break down. You're trying to talk about things that are beyond thought, beyond language, and so on and so forth. But there's no beginnings there. Again, our bhakti can begin here. So the timelessness can come within time. But time, in terms of beginnings and ends, cannot come within the timeless. You can't have time in eternity. Right? Eternity is bigger than time. Right? Can eternity come within time? Well, it's like an infinite come within the finite, I guess, of its infinite capacity. It can, that's the idea of Krishna's descent, or the descent of bhakti. Can perfection reveal itself to imperfection and come within its frame of reference? Sure, why not? It's perfect. Why not? We can do that. And by that we can become perfect. I mean, these are simple points that are very, very foundational to bhakti, as a gift, as something that's bestowed, as something that's revealed, and something that has no beginning, no time in terms of beginning or end. So there's no place for something happening there for the first time, even though new things are happening all the time. I mean, what those are the bhavas. Just like there's nothing that happens new here in one sense, just the transformation of the modes of nature. That's all it is. Modes of nature are just transforming all the time, and it's endlessly mutable. That's another way to think. Maybe it would help us understand it. Bhava is full, and its brain is full, complete, and it's always expanding at the same time. That's the whole meaning of being full, right? It's so full that it's always expanding. Something like that. So, a material event can't happen there. Offense can't happen there. Can't make offense to Krishna if you love Krishna. Become envious of Krishna. So this is the problem that I think we would probably do well to share with people. There's a problem from this side. Think about it. Think about that. But if they just want to quote somebody said that, and that's all there is to it, and not bother to deal with the fact that the same person quoted the opposites. It's an emotional issue that it's not going to be resolved by giving the scriptural conclusions, but we can try. One of my biggest problems in life, I'm trying to get over it, is thinking that people who have shown themselves to be unreasonable can be reasoned with. And 99% of the time, it's not the case. And you make a very kind and considerate and patient and authoritative from a Gaudiya perspective reply and answer, and you're expecting, well, there it is. It doesn't. It's totally misinterpreted, misunderstood, and twisted, and rejected. So yeah. I'm sorry. I guess you have to deal with people in another level rather than scripturally and logically, if possible. Their association. It's just like someone has no place in their mind at all for homosexuality. No place at all. Until they find out that their son is gay, And so, because it's now has an emotional component that's close to them and so forth, there's some opening, possibility of an opening, even though it may be first even rejected and so forth. Still, that's so. This is the way to try to help some people who are really stuck on that issue and on the wrong side of that. Perhaps invite them over. Anyway, I'm sorry.
It's probably with this particular person, it's probably even worse than that, because he's developed a theory that explains falling from Vaikuntha, and then what he calls an empathic theology, where we're feeling for Krishna because we've hurt him or something. I mean, and he's so attached to that if you get into a conversation and you can get.
But these are all made up things.
Exactly.
There's no basis in scripture for this, you know. You have to, I mean, if you say anything, the Prabhupada used to drive into our heads that you know, if you say anything, you have to support it with the scripture. I remember when we were young in LA, someone would get to the Bhagavatam class and you had these guys sitting there, you know, like this. I mean, there has to be a quote for everything. So, you know, full theory that we have empathetic, what is it?
Yeah. Well, it's sort of a covering you for Krishna. You know, oh, we've hurt him, so that's why we're suffering so much, because we've hurt Krishna so badly.
Yeah, that's a totally, you know, made up idea that just has no scriptural basis to it whatsoever, and so out there, you know, that what can you say? I mean, that someone you have to get back to some basics, like, you know, it's an interesting concept, you know, it sounds very interesting, it might work for your mind and so forth, but you know, it has no scriptural basis, and the scriptural basis is what will get you out of your mind, which is the whole problem.
Sounds like Sankaracharya making up his own
Yeah,
philosophy.
you know, make it up as you go along.
You can't be a Muni unless you have your own philosophy.
I mean, the scripture is very, very brief on the subject, and for good reason. Because when the sutras ask, the subject is God prejudiced or biased, impartial, or is he partial? Is he partial? No. He makes the world just out of love. He has no purpose. The one becomes many. But then the question comes, we see that among the many, some suffer and some are happy. For example, there's inequality. So therefore, we say that God must be partial. The sutras reply, no, it's not the partiality of God. That's the work of karma. The jiva sows seeds, and the material world responds. That's justice. And God defers to the justice. He has a relationship with his Maya Shakti. This is part of that relationship. That when the jivas take from the material energy takes back. That's justice, and he defers to that. He doesn't get involved in that. So he has nothing to do with that. And that impartiality is between you and Maya Shakti, which you have this relationship with, which is one on your part of exploitation of material nature, and material nature has a comeback. And so you're in this bond of karma. God is, he doesn't get in the way, he doesn't override it, because he has to honor the Maya Shakti, and you're doing it yourself anyway. So he is not to be blamed for our condition. But then the question comes, well, that's okay, all well and good. Then in the beginning, when karma first started, he must have started people out differently. And then the scripture says, no, because I'm Vanadi. Next. Then it goes on to the next. The next is slightly related, but different. And then the scripture goes on and takes up the issue on another level. No, because of Anadi. Where we do see partiality of God, however, is in relation to his devotees. And that is the beautiful thing. That isn't, because without that, there would be no devotees. And he talks about this. God's partial to his devotees. Of course, they're relating to him in a certain way. So naturally, he responds accordingly. You could say he's impartial. In that sense, he responds according to how people approach him. But if they approach him a certain way, then he becomes partial towards them. If they become partial towards him, he becomes partial towards them. And that is a beautiful thing. This goes on like this. But the answer really is just no, because of anadi. Which means no, because there is no beginning to karma, which is what your question was. What about the beginning of karma? No, there is no beginning. Oh yeah, right. There is no beginning to the Maya Shakti. There's no Jiva Shakti. There's no beginning to the world cycles. Okay, right. And then you go, but that doesn't work for me because I think like this. No, but you're not supposed to think like this. That's the whole thing. You're supposed to think like you're being told what the nature of reality is. That giving an explanation is the beyond your ken, beyond your ability to arrive at unto yourself. That's the whole principle of the scripture. So you just want to ignore that and go on and make up a story and so forth, and you're really not involved in Shraddha, which is Shraddha means faith in the argument of revelation. So I have faith that there are things that I can't know on my own, and the means to know that is descending, and a considerable body of that manifest descending truth is the sacred texts. So well, there are different interpretations. Well, fine, that may be. That's fine, but there's no different interpretation of this in any sampradaya. Not in Shankar Sampradaya, Ramanuja, Madhva, Nimbarka, Ballava, or Gaudiya Sampradaya. All the commentators, Ballava, Vidyabhusana, the Nimbarka commentaries, Ramanuja's commentary, Shankar, Madhva's commentary. Madhva's the only one that adds something to it. He says it's anadi, but he says the differences between the jivas in their situation is due to nadi karma, but it's also something else. You have to remember his philosophy is dvaita, difference, dvaitavad. So he says every jiva is different. And so because they're all different, then although the karma is anadi, because they're all different, they'll also respond differently to different things. But that's his added, thing. But he tries to really make the same point that God's not partial. It has nothing to do with him. Now we don't agree with that in the way that he thinks about it. And we say, of course, every jiva is equal, coming from the equal person, Paramatma. Is where the Buddha jiva comes from. Is he's equal, like your creator, so to speak, your origins. So you are. But if you and I are completely uniform, like you are one atom, I'm another atom, we both have the same number of electrons and protons and whatever else goes on in there. You're one atom, I'm another, we're different, but we're made of the same stuff. And if part of that stuff, because we're an atom of consciousness, is that we have will, we're possessed of will, and there's no reason that if two things are presented to two different atomic atoms of consciousness possessed of will, there's no reason that the two will choose the same thing. You don't have to be inherently different to make different choices. So the extra argument of Madhva it's not something that the Gaudiyas agree with. Vidyabhusana doesn't accept that. So at any rate, it's not that Madhva doesn't accept anadi karma, he does. But he kind of tries to strengthen his argument, and he's a Dvaitavad, so everything's different. Everything's different. That's his idea. So, but they're all in agreement on this across the board. And you let's take the word anadi. Okay, how does it apply to Vishnu? Anadi, Adi, Govinda, Sarva Karna Karna. To Krishna, he's anadi. Right? What does it mean? Does it mean that he has some time he began? No, it means he has no beginning, right? Obviously. You don't, if I say Vishnu is Anadi, you don't try to interpret the word Anadi to mean anything other than beginningless, right? So if I say the Jiva is Anadi, do you try to argue that, well, actually he has a beginning and sometime he didn't exist? You know, the teaching the Jiva is eternal. So it has no beginning. So you're asking, what about, does Maya Shakti have a beginning? Was there a time when the Maya Shakti didn't exist? No, all Krishna Shaktis are eternally existent. Now the Maya Shaktis manifest sometimes not. Okay, you got it. So Maya Shakti has no beginning. It's an right? Simple. We know what the word means. Okay. The Jiva Shakti term has no beginning. It's an adi. Yeah, we know. Vishnu and karma. No. We have to interpret the word anadi differently here. Now we have to interpret it differently. And all you're talking about is, wait a minute, there's the Maya Shakti, there's the Jiva Shakti, there's Bhagavan, and these make up the world, so to speak. Vishnu's beyond it, but these Shaktis come from him. And the Jiva Shakti, Krishna says in the Gita, after describing Bhumirapana Lobayo and Aparayamitastvanyam, Prakritim Vidimepram Jiva Bhuta, the Jiva, the Para Prakriti, and the Apara Prakriti, the Maya elements. After that verse, he says, the world is but these two. The interaction of the two, and of course we know from the Gita that the binding force is karma. So if this one is eternal, that one is eternal, their source has no beginning, their source has no beginning. What gives you the right to think all of a sudden that the binding force for which the same term is used, anadi? I mean, it's, if you say, it doesn't say that karma is anadi, it says the world is anadi. Okay, good. Well, what's the world? It's the Maya Shakti, the Jivas, and that which holds them together, which is called karma. You can't have a material world without karma. What's the meaning of a material world without karma? That's the glue, so to speak. That's what connects the Jiva and the Maya. So you can't say, well, it's speaking about the Jivas and not, but the world's not, but not karma. I mean, where do you get the right to, give a new interpretation to the word as it applies to karma? There's no room for that.
So that's the linchpin for this point of the Jiva not falling, not only, but
Yeah, well, that's from one side. The other side is we talk about the nature of the spiritual world and so forth.
right. Because karma is anadi, and we're currently in karma, that means we've been in anadi karma, and it's only at the liberated when you're out of that karma. If you're in karma, you've been in karma
Forever.
for an infinite.
Really.
That's like the core, which was really far out, because I kept thinking we're looking to the 6 Goswamis to sort out the differences between what Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur have said both things about the fall of the Jiva. And how do you sort this out? Well, we look to the 6 Goswamis.
Yeah.
But we look to all the sampradayas, and this core view of the world.
Look at all the Sampradayas, all the scriptures, every single one. It's in the Chaitamrita, it's in the Bhagavatam, it's in the Gita, it's in the Pancharatras, it's everywhere.
But Prabhupada says in his introduction to Bhagavad Gita that of these 5 things, only karma is not eternal.
Yeah, that means that karma can
You can
influence
reverse.
to an end.
For the individual.
It has no beginning, right, but it can end for the
Your
individual.
karma.
Your karma can end.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good news. That's good news. Yeah.
It's the gospel.
Wow, that was-
Amazing explanation.
That was really good.
Okay. What's the time?
It's after 8:30.
2.
We could talk some more. We can go.
Yeah, no, night.
It's a nadi
It's an hour.
and
And as
ananta.
it turns, no.
I heard you used to stay up until midnight with a clock at Urchin.
I was younger. Shishi Gaurama.
Jai.
Lord Premanand.
Bhakti Vedanta Tripurari Swami Guru Maharaj Ki Jai.